You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in.
a Mamamia podcast.
Hello. How are you? Good to see you.
4 kids, 3 dads, 3 glamorous jobs, 2 weddings that could not have been more different from each other, a couple of famous friends, and one crushing disappointment that still hurts. The life of Justine Cullen is a lot, and it's fascinating. From Mamamia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, a weekly interview podcast with people who tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. Justine Cullen is a former beauty editor, an award-winning fashion magazine editor, and now she's also an author.
Hayden keeps laughing at me because I keep saying to people when they read it, what bits did you laugh in? And he's like, you're not a comedian. Stop thinking that you're a comedian.
No, it's true, but you want to know. What do you picture when I say all that? Do you imagine someone with perfectly blonde hair in very high heels and a jacket? No. The best word to describe Justine's life is bohemian. She's a woman of colour and she co-parents her kids with the 3 good men who fathered them. Sometimes it's complicated and it's never dull. I wanted to start our conversation at the moment where Justine's glamorous life in her 20s took a very sharp and unexpected turn. When you had your first baby, Milo, tell me where you were at in your life.
I had just started working for you, actually, at Dolly. I was only a few months in. In terms of the rest of my life, I was just a fun party beauty editor person with not much to worry about. You know, it's a very pleasant life. And
how old were you?
I was 27. I think it was young for that world. It probably wasn't young if I was somewhere else and in a different career. And
young in your group of friends.
Absolutely.
And
I was definitely the first in the group of friends.
Did it derail your career?
I thought so at the time. I really did. I definitely had big plans. I was really excited to get into teen because I'd been at Marie Claire and I was leaving beauty and I was ready to leave beauty.
So you were the deputy at Dolly?
Went to be the deputy at Dolly.
On a track to be editor?
I thought so. Yeah, that would have been the dream. So I thought it at the time, but in hindsight, I don't think so. I think it pushed me creatively more than I would have if I just stayed on the same track. And it made me hungrier, not necessarily in terms of ambition, but in terms of doing good work and doing fun work that I got really excited by. So I thought at the time it wasn't. The dad was Adam, who I had been in love with for a very long time. And it was a very surprising pregnancy.
How long had you guys been together?
We'd been on and off for a number of years, but this particular time had only been together for a few months.
And he was a surfy dude. You loved him madly. Did you both know that you wanted to have that baby?
We were both people who really wanted babies, you know, so.
Really?
Yeah, weirdly. I don't think we ever thought that we really wanted them together. We just were both keen to have babies.
Anyone will do.
Pretty much. I knew straight away that we would be having the baby and we were both happy about it. I don't think we knew what we were getting in for, really. But I was just this sort of pregnant girl living in the city and I would go and have, you know, dinners at Hugo's Pizza with my girlfriends and then they'd go on to a big night and I'd take my big belly home. I'd usually walk home to Rushcutters Bay from the Cross with my huge, enormous stomach. It was very different, I think, first pregnancy to many people's first pregnancies because I still lived the life that I was living before.
And what was that life like? You know, you had a tight group of girlfriends. You were in mag world when it was at its peak and for the next few years.
Days.
Your friends were other women who worked in magazines.
Many of them still are.
Yeah. What was your day-to-day life like?
I mean, the life of a beauty editor is pretty well documented. It's just lovely lunches and working at ACP at that time was half the time it felt like you were at a party rather than at work. We all worked hard and we did good work, but everyone was similar. And, you know, I was thinking about this on the drive in here that I remember you had this sequined butterfly top, this vintage butterfly top that you bought from eBay. And the next day, everyone would have one. You know? So we all sort of looked the same and we're all these sparkly little things. And it was just a really kind of a lovely world. Everyone was nice. There were no bitches. It was a very pleasant life.
So you left your full-time job when you had Milo?
While I was pregnant, actually, I wanted to sort of establish a freelance career before having the baby.
And then how did you manage that after he was born?
You know, it was pretty easy. I was just churning out work. I'm one of those people who can sort of sit down and write about anything, whereas my ex-partner was also a writer, but he would need to be hit by the
muse,
creative muse, and it had to be coming from somewhere deep inside, whereas, you know, I would have any random magazine say to me, could you write a story on having sex after a big night and the remorse you feel afterwards? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can give you 1,000 words on that, and, you know, churn it out in a couple of hours. So I would just sit there and non-stop write, and it was
And then you'd have to write something for Cosmo Pregnancy, about stretch marks.
Exactly. Then I switched back to beauty for a while, so I was sort of everyone's go-to.
Then you had another baby. Why did you do that so quickly, Jess?
You know, we were having one of those moments. It had all worked out. Everything was going really well. And we just sort of looked at each other one day and we're like, this is great. We should have another baby. And then the next day we said, we're stupid. He's not even one yet. But then we were already pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very
you're
fertile.
Very fertile. Were you and Adam still tight? Were things going well between the two of you?
Yeah, and we were together. We were a couple. You know, I'd moved to the Northern Beaches by this stage. It all seemed like it was going really well on the surface.
What was below the surface?
Well, to be honest, I sort of mentioned this in the book, that I think that we were two people more enamoured with the idea of having a family and our kids than we probably were with each other. And I, even in going into that relationship, had sort of had this checklist that many girls in their 20s have of all the things that I wanted in a guy. And they were not deep and not meaningful. They were things like green eyes, had to grow up on a farm.
What?
He needed to play the guitar.
It's quite specific. So was this a description of Adam?
Pretty much. Yeah, my girlfriend who I showed it to was like, oh, God, I know him. This is going to end in tears. And she was right. But saying that, we are great mates now and have been very good parents together this entire 16 years.
How did you know it was time to call time on that relationship?
For us, I think it was just an argument, a fight that kind of blew out, and we were young enough and dumb enough and didn't own enough for it to be an issue. It just sort of fizzled. And I know that sounds ridiculous when you've got two children, but I think it was just one of those things where neither of us tried hard enough to get back together at any one moment, or maybe at different times we might have wanted to, but the other one didn't, and we took turns in that. And it was just, I think we both knew that we were not each other's person.
How old were the boys at that stage?
3 and 1.
And what did you do about custody and how did you manage all of that?
Well, initially we did the split weeks because they were only in preschool, so it wasn't a big deal. And then when they started school, that becomes a lot harder. And so, you know, I would primarily have them and then they would go to his house on the weekends or every second weekend and in the holidays, that sort of thing.
And they were probably too young to really need much of an explanation.
Yeah, this was their normal. And, you know, I didn't know my dad growing up. I sort of vaguely knew him and I had little memories of him. And Adam as well was from, you know, a divorced family. So it all felt very natural and it was just our normal and it was their normal and that was okay.
Did you feel a sense of failure?
No. I felt terrified that I would be alone forever. And you're very much like, oh my God, I've got 2 kids and no one will ever love me. And that sort of played in my head. It wasn't about that relationship. I knew that that relationship wasn't right, but I was very, very scared of growing old alone.
How did you just manage being a single mum? What were you doing for work at this stage?
I was still freelancing and I was at Shop to Drop as style director, which I think is one of those silly made-up titles that happens in magazines.
Yeah, what did that mean at that
whatever
stage?
They need to throw my way. You know?
Did you work from home? Or?
Yeah, a lot of the time. Yes, I think I was in a couple of days a week.
How did you sort of see your career going? Were you like, well, I've got to put things a bit on hold because I have to work from home because of the logistics of having 2 little kids and being a single mum?
No, I mean, I've always had an amazing mother. So my mum's always been there and she's done a lot of the raising of my kids while I've had to go to work. I don't think at that point I ever felt particularly ambitious. I just really loved working and I loved doing what I did. So I was quite happy to just plod along week to week and work it out. I've always just been so lucky that I've had that support around in terms of my family and my mother, and I don't know what I would have done without her.
Fear of being alone, did that propel you into your next relationship, do you think?
Absolutely. I just met a really good man and I thought, that's the right decision. That's the smart decision. I'd already had this sort of one big heartbreak and I didn't want to go through that again. And none of these were thoughts that were consciously running through my head. This wasn't my internal monologue, but I just feel like these were the motivations in terms of the decisions that I made. And I just found a lovely man who was great with the boys and an excellent role model. And I just thought, right, well, that's what you do. You marry that good man. Then they're few and far between. And particularly with this idea that I had that, I've got 2 kids. Who's ever going to want me now? And can I just say, for any single mothers out there, that is never a thing. And when I think now, when you think of all the step parents in the world, all of those people are people who fell in love with someone with kids. So it's obviously not the impossible feat that you think it will be.
But you do feel, I remember when my husband and I split up for a few years, I felt that having a child was a disadvantage, in terms of meeting someone else, the way they looked at me, not a disadvantage for me personally, but I felt that for my husband being a single dad, that was like considered a cool thing, and that women were like, oh, you're so good with kids. And
absolutely.
Like that sort of
standard.
Yeah, it did feel like that. But you're right. It's like there's not a lot of men who'll go, nah, don't want to bar of that. That's too hard.
No, it's never a thing. And I've seen this with many of my girlfriends and people who I know, that I've never heard any man or woman say, yeah, no, they're perfect for me, but that's too hard.
Too much baggage. So your wedding, you got to organise a wedding, your first wedding.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I'm a very good party planner, let me tell you. I think we were engaged for about 4 months and I really threw myself into the planning, and I think a lot of that was this idea that I was trying to push down and suppress what I probably knew at that point already. I wasn't letting myself think it, but I think I, on some level, must have really understood what I was doing. And so all the energy that I should have put into thinking about the marriage and the couple and the person all instead went into this event. And God, it was fun though.
I remember stalking it on Instagram, following it all. Tell us a little bit about, because you talk about how in your book about how it was the height of sort of personalizations and weddings. It was the ultimate Instagram wedding.
And it was very early on. So now when I look at it, I think, oh, what a cliche. But actually at that time it was all sort of fresh and new.
What were some of the things you did?
We had a psychic, a quite famous local psychic, come and do love readings for all the guests. And we had a whiskey bar set up in the garden, in the rose garden. There was karaoke room, and there were all these kinds of tiny little personalised touches everywhere, and the kind of American street food that was really big at the time, and a teepee tent area for the children, and very peak 2012 weddings.
What did you wear?
I wore Jenny Packham. It was just a frothy tulle wedding dress, all the froth that you could have. And it was in the country, and I wanted a dress where I could dance barefoot on a table. And
did you?
And I did.
Of course you did.
Yeah, had a great time.
Where were you working at this stage?
I was at Shop Till You Drop. The shop team at that time, I still work with so many of these people now, but everybody was a little bit like that. Everyone was all out in the personalisation gifts. And so it was almost like a group effort. This wedding was,
Were you the editor at that stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was your first experience of being an editor.
Yeah.
How was it different to what you dreamed of?
It was sort of anticlimactic, I would say. And my vision of editing was you and Paula and Pat Ingram and all of these wonderful people who I had worked with, and it seemed so incredibly glamorous. And I had always thought that, I mentioned in the book, I thought there would be some magical key to the Kerry Packer mistress tunnels, and I thought you would find out all these wonderful things, and instead it was a little bit like, off you go.
Here's a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Best of luck.
What's a KPI? In many ways, editing is just another middle management kind of a role, and you have, a staff of 18, 20 people who you have to manage. And
it's running a small business, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. There are some incredible things about the job, and then there are just some very mundane, everyday things like, being nagged about your career expenditure or,
having to sign off people's expenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In later years, I would learn that you would have someone who you just say, that is the other part of my brain and I don't do any of that stuff. But I was a bit off that at that stage.
How soon after the wedding did you get pregnant again?
Pretty much immediately. I think I'm less this now, and definitely COVID, like for many people, has struck this out of me a little bit, but I can be a real box ticker. Let's just get it done. Here's the list, let's get it done. And so I was very conscious of the idea that, I was 35 at this point. I didn't have forever. I didn't want to have, which is funny now saying it, but I didn't want to have a huge gap between my children's ages. And so, we fell pregnant pretty quickly. And I was also, at this point, there was the idea that Elle might be coming to Australia.
Elle magazine.
Elle magazine, which had been my dream since I interned there in its first incarnation.
So it used to be in Australia, then it closed down here.
For about 10 years.
And then there were rumours that it was coming back.
Yes. And that was the only real dream that I'd ever had. And still in my career, I don't really have another. There's not anything else where I think, oh, I think that's my career bucket list. And so I was very aware that it was coming, that I didn't know when, and that falling pregnant might not be a timely exercise. So I kind of had put it off for a little while and then just went, you know what, I'm better off to get it done now, and then hopefully it won't be here yet.
So there's some scheduling involved.
Oh, with everything.
That's so funny. I always see you as such a big romantic, but you've got a very logical, practical mind as far as...
I think I'm both. Our friend Bron McCann texted me last night saying that she wanted to go on a trip and did I have an itinerary because I'd been there, and I immediately sent her, it's like a 4-page spreadsheet with all of the time that it would take me to get from a hotel to a museum in 8-year-old feet and all of that sort of thing.
I remember around this time you were pregnant with your third child. We were doing one of those ridiculous magazine things. I was out of magazines by that stage, but we were being taken to see Lady Gaga by, I believe, Elizabeth Arden.
Oh, that show was horrific.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. I left at halftime, whatever halftime's called, intermission. Anyway, so we'd been taken by this beauty company. We were all in this bus. We were heading out to wherever it was to go and see Lady Gaga. You were pregnant, and I think you had either just found out whether you were having a boy or a girl, or you were about to. Tell me how you were feeling about the gender of your child.
I remember our exchange actually because I was very deeply in this place of, oh my God, it's another boy.
So you just found out?
I just found out. My natural reaction to things is to just, be a bit self-deprecating and make a joke about it. And so, I was probably throwing out asides, and you were like, it's a baby. It's your baby.
I feel really guilty about that because you were clearly crestfallen about it. And the baggage that I bring to that, which is very easy to bring because I've got 2 boys and a girl, and having lost a baby halfway through a pregnancy, and I know you've had miscarriages as well, I'm like, how dare anyone be ungrateful that they're having a baby? And that's not fair because gender disappointment is a real thing. And I wanted to apologise for being judgy and dismissive of the very real grief that you were feeling about the little girl that you thought you were never going to have.
And I feel that way too when I hear about it. And when I talk about, gender disappointment in the book, it's such a ridiculous term. And it's actually a ridiculous thing because we all know that gender is not something that is decided in the womb, and it is a real thing, and it's often not related to, I think, the superficial aspects that we put it down to. And for me at that time with that pregnancy, my gender disappointment was much more related to my latent feelings about my marriage than it was about the child itself. I was really nervous of having a mini him because I felt like we didn't know each other, and I would be like, how do I relate to a little boy who maybe not be as me as the other two are? And so I was just channeling a whole lot of feelings that really had nothing to do with the baby into the pregnancy. And it was a very different experience of the pregnancy because the magic was sort of gone by this stage. It was my 3rd rodeo, and all I was feeling was, the weight of it and the uncomfortableness of it. And I really wasn't connecting to the baby in any real way.
Were you worried that you wouldn't love the baby?
Absolutely. And I felt sick about it all the time. I'm so connected to my kids, and the idea that I didn't feel any connection with this baby and I was worried that I wouldn't love him, it really scared me. And I didn't know how to, you can't talk about that with anyone.
No.
You're going to say, I'm not really into this kid. Yeah. Like, you just can't say that. And so I just kept it all inside, and it sort of fermented and it channeled in really weird ways. But then when he was born, weirdly, he was the very first one who I looked at and was like, oh my God, I love you. Like the others, I was tired, or I don't know, just in that weird stage that you have after you have a baby where you're not really thinking of anything. But with him, we were really connected straight away. he can still really push my buttons more than any other kid that I have.
Now you had a newborn, 2 primary school kids, an ex-partner, a marriage that you weren't very happy in, and your dream job coming down the pipeline at you. What happened next in those next few weeks with your career and with Elle?
Well, I had been non-stop applying for the Elle job without even knowing if there was a job for the entire year.
How did you do that?
I'd just been writing props and getting designer friends to design them up and sending them off and doing mocks.
Who did you send them to?
Hearst.
So Hearst were the people who owned the license in America.
And also the publishers in Australia. So
Yeah,
I knew that there would be a joint venture of some kind and I would just send them off to anyone. And I was making it, I think, very uncomfortable for everyone in the building because they didn't want to let me down. I think they probably wanted, you know, maybe an international name or someone a little bit more glamorous, not necessarily just an internal promotion.
You were still an editor on Shop Till You Drop and you were on maternity leave.
Yeah, and Shop Till You Drop was really successful,
Very
but it was a
successful.
shopping magazine. You know, it wasn't necessarily a big international masthead.
So for people who don't remember that magazine, it was a genre of magazine that was called for a little while a magalog. So it was a little bit like a cross between a magazine and a catalogue. It was very much, here's a bunch of stuff that you can buy. Still shot in really interesting ways, but it was very much about clothes rather than about sort of fashion.
Absolutely.
right?
It was a service. And I think, you know, weirdly, it is the magazine that more people will come up and tell me that was their favourite magazine.
Yeah, because it
than
made
anything
people
else.
like me who felt intimidated by fashion magazines and didn't, you know, want to read a 10-page article about a particular designer. I just wanted to know where 7 pairs of great jeans were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where can I get it? How much is it? What are the other versions of it? And, you know, I think what we did really well was add a lot of emotion into that because a catalogue is boring. Nobody wants a catalogue. So what we tried to do was do it, you know, there was still a lot of storytelling in there and we made it really fun and gave it a lot of personality. And so I still have women all the time come and tell me how much they loved that magazine.
But you were over it and you wanted to edit Elle.
You know what? I wasn't really over it. I just really wanted Elle.
Yeah.
You know, Elle has always been, I think, a perfect representation of how my brain works. It's about new books and politics and things that women are talking about, and it champions women in a really amazing way. And that international brand was something that I felt was missing in the Australian market. So I was desperate to be the editor of it.
So you had this newborn, you were trying to get this job, and what happened next?
I just waited. I was just playing this waiting game. And there was a moment where I had mastitis and it was summer and it was stinking hot and I was sitting in my underwear on the sofa trying desperately to feed this baby and in a world of pain. And I got the call saying, well, Hearst and Lagardère, who are the French owners of the licence, are coming to Australia and they'd like to meet you and can you be here next week? And so that was sort of this big moment. Everything had been leading up over that past year and really my entire career to this one moment sitting on the couch in my maternity knickers. And then I still didn't get the job. So I had the meeting.
And you'd done all this work, you had all these presentations.
I had multiple presentations.
And what, you just didn't hear anything?
Hadn't heard anything. I think there were so many stakeholders in this and no one wanted to make a decision. And then a girlfriend of mine, Bron, was actually going to New York for Fashion Week. And every year we had always gone to Fashion Week together.
She was the editor of Cosmo.
She was. And I wasn't going because I had a newborn and I was on maternity leave. And then there was just this moment where I thought, Hearst is there. I could get some FaceTime. I felt like I may as well just give it one last shot. This is me box ticking again. Let's just get it done. And so I packed a hand pump and went to New York and had no reason to be there. I just stayed in Bron's room and followed her around and went to all her meetings. And I'm sure they were thinking, what is this person doing?
Wow. So you paid for yourself to go over there.
Yeah.
You left Scout, who was 6 weeks?
6 weeks old.
With who?
With his dad.
Of course.
Yes.
That's a very sexist question.
We would never ask that of a man.
Yeah, you wouldn't. Good point. So you left him with his dad and you just went.
And I went for 2 days. So
Sorry?
I flew in. I had a day on the ground. So 2 days on the ground and then flew home. So 4 in total.
And you took a breast pump because, like, did you leave milk for this baby?
So I had the double electric pump at home and I pumped for Australia in the lead up. And there was a freezer full of milk, so we were fine there. But then I took the pump because I had such an oversupply by this stage. My body thought it was feeding triplets. And so I just had to keep pumping. I was literally having to go and pump every half an hour somewhere.
So for people who haven't breastfed before, you can increase your milk supply by basically tricking your body into thinking that you've got to feed your child more than it actually needs. And that can get you into trouble with mastitis. That's how I ended up getting mastitis a lot of times.
Me too.
But so you had to keep pumping.
With this pathetic little hand pump, you know.
God, you must have got RSI. And then just tipping it down the sink or whatever.
Down the drain, on the street, wherever we could find a place to stash the liquid gold,
so
it would just run.
You just stayed with Bron, stayed in her room and just turned up at her meetings and tried to get in front of these people, hoping that they would go, you're amazing. Like, did they know who you were or why you were there?
They did. And I'd already had meetings with them and they knew. We were very transparent about, I'm here to make you love me. And I thought that this would be a really appropriate time for me to be my most charming self when I'm pretty much bleeding from the nipples. And in a world of pain and crying because I've left my baby behind every day. But then I'd turn up to the dinner and I would do my best. And, you know, they were lovely and I've always had a great relationship with her. So
did you get the job?
Well. I got the job.
Wow. That's going above and beyond, isn't it?
God, that would have been a sad story if I didn't.
It would have been a really sad story. You're listening to No Filter with me, Mia Friedman, and Justine Cullen. So as the editor of Elle, how often would you get flown to fashion shows?
Well, you would go to fashion shows a few times a year.
Why did you need to?
Well, Fashion Week is not really about the shows. I mean, of course it is, and that's inspiration and it is giving you the mental equipment that you need to be able to create what you want to create for the next 6 months.
That sounds a bit wanky though.
Well,
is it?
Really though, the reason that you go is because it's like a conference. So it is every fashion person, every brand, every designer and their PRs, all of the talent bookers and the model agents, they all congregate in these 3 places. And Australia don't generally go to London because it sort of goes New York, London, Milan and then Paris. Yeah. And Paris is kind of the peak. Milan is where lots of the big brands are, the big Italian brands. So that's important for advertisers. Usually New York is very business. So for New York, you might go there for a beauty brand for a different reason other than...
So like L'Oreal might fly everybody over, pay for everybody's accommodation and flights.
Exactly.
Business class?
Yes.
Wow. And then you would go to these amazing shows. What's it like being at an international fashion show? I've never been to one.
It is so spectacular at those shows that it's kind of hard to comprehend. And it's really interesting now thinking back at that time. You know, we're talking about Dior shows where they would cover an entire building in real flowers, or Chanel shows where, you know, they turn the Grand Palais where they have their shows every season, they would turn it into a supermarket or an airport and it would feel very real. There was a time when there were real trees planted with actual autumn leaves all over the ground in this.
So that some models could walk around with very expensive clothes and walk around it. How much would that cost?
I cannot even comprehend it.
And why did the fashion brands do it? Because it was like advertising.
Absolutely.
Like who would be in the audience?
VIP customers, buyers from all around the world, media from around the world.
So buyers for department
Celebrities,
stores.
obviously, yes.
Celebrities, media.
And everybody is seated, you know, according to their country. So you would sort of have...
And their importance?
Obviously in terms of the rows, yes. So you want to be in the front row and then progressively less important as it goes back.
Who gets to be in the front row?
All the editors, even the Australian ones, which is a bit special. And the big celebrities.
And what did you wear?
Generally lots of borrowed clothes. So
really?
you would
have to dress for the part?
You would dress, yes. So you would be styled for the 2 weeks. And for me, you know, I like to eat. And so you would do Milan first. And by the time I got to Paris, I barely fit anything because I'd just eaten like my life in Panzerotti. And then I'd show up like, oh my God, how am I going to get into this sample?
But so you almost have to like wear these costumes to go and do your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Like a red carpet.
A little bit, but I think, you know, for media it's different. You know, you're not trying to be photographed by a street style photographer, for example. And they really are. You know, in Paris it's like there's barricades and there's people lining up to watch people walk into the shows and the crowd is, you know, 4 deep and they're screaming out the names of editors and, you know, Anna Wintour walks past and there's almost a Mexican wave that goes on. You know, it does feel like a rock show, you know, in many ways. But the reality of it is that it's business. And so you've all flown in and you will have a breakfast meeting and then shows through the day and you generally meet someone for lunch. And then you would meet someone for dinner, and then generally there would be an after party of some kind, or something that you have to show up to because it's an advertiser and that's part of the job. You sort of go from 7, 8 in the morning until midnight every single day.
In heels?
In heels. Well, not so much towards the end, because then sneakers became the thing, and thank God for those.
Yeah, tell me about that. So you talk about how in the last few years fashion has really changed in quite a feminist way. Tell me in what way?
You know, I think when we think about feminist fashion, we talk about pussy hats and slogan T-shirts. And for me, I think the real shift in fashion has come from the fact that clothes now are designed to make a woman be able to move. So for a long time, we couldn't walk in our shoes. We were maybe in a stiff blazer or a dress. And I mean, of course, this has changed since the 1920s, when clothes sort of loosened up and people were able to wear fabrics like jersey and things that allowed them to move.
And even the idea of women wearing pants was a big deal.
Exactly. But I think over the past few years, this move towards active wear as everyday wear. I mean, I didn't think there would ever be a day where you could just wear leggings to work and that was acceptable, but it is now in many places. Sneakers.
Leggings have officially become pants. I give up.
I know, who would have ever
I've joined that train. I'm on that train.
I'm sure I've ranted about this in the past,
so have I.
Now I do it.
Yeah, 100%.
It's amazing how slowly those things creep up on you. But yeah, so, you know, the crossbody bag.
We all used to teeter around in heels carrying these
the
silly
bags.
handbags, right?
The big Balenciaga or fake Balenciaga lariats that everyone used to have, where, you know, you looked like an Olsen and you would be like carrying them and they'd weigh you down. I feel like that progression has been so kind to women. Even our bras. I mean, I haven't worn a bra with an underwire for a really long time.
There's lots of options, aren't there?
Yeah.
You write in the book about crossbody bags, how just having your arms free, that's a really important development.
I think so. And, you know, most of the time now I don't even bother with a handbag at all because, you know, you've got everything on your phone. And doesn't that make you feel so capable? I don't know if it makes me feel capable or if I like it because it makes me feel like my driver is outside with all my stuff.
Because some people would have that, right? So like all that fashion would be for the women who didn't have to walk further than from her hire car, chauffeur-driven car to the, you know, restaurant or the shop. Whatever.
It was never for the person who was taking a 5-year-old into the classroom and, you know,
which is what you were doing.
Run into the playground and then run out of the playground because they were late and then get through a bunch of meetings and a nightly event. No, it was never meant to be for us.
You said that Elle magazine was your dream job until it wasn't. What changed?
It was a combination of things. I think on one level it was that the industry was dying and it was becoming harder and harder to do my job from a budget perspective and from a management perspective. But I think on another level, I was experiencing what lots of women who were like me, who had one dream and were very focused on their career, what they were experiencing, which is just that you get there and then you suddenly go, does that work for me? Is this actually what I thought it would be? And you know, for me, the answer was when I was having to go to Europe every 6 weeks, which now post-COVID, it sounds like a dream, and I still can't believe that
every 6
that
weeks.
Yeah, I was on a plane all the time for different events, and often just for a day. Again, New York for a day, Berlin for a day.
Doesn't that all sound grotesque now when you think back about the carbon emissions and the money wasted and
to go to an event, to speak to someone. It's so foreign now. And I think, you know, that whole world, the fashion shows and the excess, the wonderful thing about what's happened over the past 12 months is that that is now seen through a much more conscious lens.
It all collapsed in on itself, didn't it? That whole business model.
And thank God it had to, because it wasn't sustainable for the businesses, for the people, or for the planet.
You left your marriage.
I did.
You now had an ex-husband, an ex-partner and 3 children. That sounds like a lot of organisation. How do you manage co-parenting just logistically?
I mean, I don't feel like we've had a lot of logistical issues with it. So we...
But how does everyone going to different places, holidays, different dads, text messages?
School holidays are the only tricky thing. So the kids all live with us all the time, and Scout goes to his dad every second weekend and half the holidays, and the older boys go to their dad in the holidays. So our day-to-day during term time is really normal, like a normal family. It's only when it comes to those school holidays and the scheduling of that, and sometimes, you know, I just will forget to tell one of them that we're going somewhere. You know, it's usually on me, to be honest.
But just even communicating about you know, this one's report came in or this one got a detention or I'm concerned about this one, he needs braces, whatever. How do you manage all of that? Is it?
Well, to be honest, that's me and Hato. The day-to-day parenting is us, and Hato is an unbelievable parent. It's shocking to me that he is someone who didn't really ever intend to have children and suddenly had 3 and then 4, and yet is wonderful at it, much better than I am at parenting.
How did you guys meet?
We met through friends. We had known each other for a little while, but just on the periphery of each other's lives. And then there was just a moment where we were at a party and had a kind of lightning bolt moment of, oh, I think I love you.
Oh.
I think I might love you.
That's a plot twist. And you mentioned you met through friends. You're part of what I consider a group of 4 very tight girlfriends, Bronwyn McCann, Zoe Foster-Blake, Christine Centenera, and you. And you all sort of came up in magazines at the same time. Now, you and Bron have got public profiles, but Zoe and Christine are sort of next level famous.
Yes, the Daily Mail's not following Bron and I anywhere.
No, sometimes you guys are collateral damage and you're in the background of a shot. But women particularly are obsessed with those 2 women. Mm-hmm. They have massive, massive followings and fan base. What's it like when you've got friends who become that kind of level of famous during your friendship?
I don't really think about that. And we do a lot of, well, to be honest, we haven't all lived in the same city for a long time. So Bron and I were always in Sydney, Zoe was in Melbourne, and Christine was in New York. So it's not like we were running around the city and I was able to witness it very much. You know, when we saw each other, it was generally in someone's house, or Christine and I would catch up at the shows and hide in a hotel room. So it wasn't something that I was really there for. I obviously see now how it happens, and it's bizarre, but I can completely see why the world would be enamoured with both of them, because they are incredible
We were all
people.
kind of obsessed with them. They both had something about them, as did you and Bron. But I should explain, Christine is an internationally famous stylist. She's constantly on best dressed women in the world lists. She's worked with everyone from Anna Wintour to Kanye. She has her own label called Wardrobe NYC. She's one of the people who is the ultimate in street style. You know, there are whole blogs devoted to her.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, Zoe is, you know, they're both lady startups. They've both become entrepreneurs and started their own businesses, as has Bron. But when you sort of get together as girlfriends, are the Daily Mail following you? And is that a bummer? Because I can't imagine that would be fantastic fun.
I've never experienced it, but, you know, we're all hermits. I mean, I've really let my hermit flag fly through COVID, and Zoe is the same. You know, none of us really like going anywhere. So we're all quite happy to just stay at home and be in someone's house. And we're all also busy that, like with any group of girlfriends, really a lot of the time it's, oh my God, I haven't spoken to you for 3 weeks or 3 months in some cases. But it feels like it's never happened. I think that's the joy of old friends and friends who've sort of seen it all and been with you. You know, whenever Christine feels too fancy, we're always happy to remind her that she used to work in marketing.
Oh, yeah. Christine from marketing. My husband and I met through our closest friends in the same way that, you know, Hato is close to Hamish and you're close to Zoe. Originally, we thought that would be awesome. We met through Paula and her husband Saxon, Paula Joy. But we soon found that sort of it was a bit weird, the 4 of us hanging out together sometimes, because I can't even explain why, but we sort of stopped doing it after the beginning. How do you manage that dynamic? Because there's the intimacy of you and your friend, but then also the intimacy of you and your partner. And we found that wires could get a bit tangled.
I mean, Zoe and Hamish, since they've been married, and definitely since Hato and I have been together, have been in Melbourne. So it's only recently that they've moved to Sydney. So we are all in raptures about this. You know, my husband has got his best friend back. I have to share him for the first time in our relationship, which is very sad for me, but I'm so happy for him that he has his person back in his, you know, immediate vicinity. So I haven't got there yet. I'm still just loving that our children are going to get to be friends and know each other and all of those things that felt like they would never happen before. So, yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Definitely for Hato, he moved to Sydney after we met and immediately moved up to the beaches, to the suburbs, became a dad. You know, his life changed so dramatically. Whereas before in Melbourne, he was their nudge. He lived behind Zoe and Hamish and would just, pop over the fence all the time. So I think for all of them to be reunited in that way is a really lovely thing. I look forward to the day I can be annoyed by it.
How do you manage the relationships between the kids and the other kids' fathers? Like, how does Scout relate to the older boy's dad? And how does all of those kind of cross, because there are 3 men that are involved in different ways? I
don't think that they really acknowledge them in any other way than that they're great family friends, or, there are a lot of spirit uncles and aunties in our life. We are very much, it takes a village. And so it's really normal for them. During the last school holidays, the boys were getting picked up to go to their respective dads, and then we realised that Adam could drop Scout off at Greg's on the way. And so, that becomes an easy win for everyone. And I think everyone is a human and everyone just treats everyone else like a human, and the kids have somehow absorbed that, and it doesn't feel weird to them at all. I did have, Scout asked the question the other day. He was like, how many dads do I have?
Your father is Indonesian and you write about experiencing racism. You talk about sexual racism, which I thought was really interesting, about people assuming that your mother was Indonesian.
Must be the Indonesian one, absolutely. Yeah. And that happens all the time. It's those microaggressions, and I think that's being biracial is really about microaggressions. There's no sort of very overt racism that I've experienced. I find this whole period where we've been talking about the rise in Asian violence, particularly in the States, and it's opened up my eyes to the microaggressions in a way that maybe the Me Too movement opened up my eyes and many other women's eyes in terms of sexual violence. And for me, I realised there were so many times over the years where I've made a joke at my own expense or said something racist about myself as a way to make other people feel comfortable, or if I felt like maybe there was an elephant in the room. And it was this really strange way of me processing this strange covert racism that I was experiencing in some way. Or, potentially I was making it all up in my head as well, but it has really made me look at myself and my actions and the things, my self-talk in a way that I hadn't before. So for me, when I was very young, I moved to the suburbs from an inner city primary school. And that was the first time that I really saw that I was different. And there were, boys who would pull their eyes into slits. And I think those things really stay with you in ways that, you don't necessarily process at the time. It just becomes like an annoying thing. Or, I talk in the book about people saying, come on, Lucy Lou. And I'm like, I look nothing like Lucy. She's incredible, but I don't look anything like her. And that's so offensive in itself.
It's really reductive, yeah.
Yeah.
Just finally, you had another boy. How'd that go?
Fuck this.
How did you manage it this time?
I'm still so uncomfortable talking about this idea of gender disappointment because it really does disgust me. But, God, I was so deep in all the forums. There are many, many gender forums out there, and they are terrifying places that you do not ever want to visit.
But, why are they terrifying?
Well, just people who are really deranged and throwing around this quasi-science and recommendations to people on how they can have a boy or how they can have a girl.
Stand on one leg and eat only pickles and have sex by the full moon.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And I did all of it. I consider myself a relatively smart woman, but I sucked it all up and I did all of it. Of course, none of it worked. I had another boy. But, yeah, finding out that he was a boy, it was a horrible experience just in terms of how I reacted. I didn't recognise myself, but I was very much, as you said before, I was grieving for this idea of a person that I had created in my head who was never going to be real.
Yeah.
And I just had to get that out. And it really took my other children to make me realise, because I'd been going, another fucking boy. Just to my husband, of course.
I just want someone to paint nails with, although, of course, you can paint the nails of any child.
Of course, and I do
But
often.
A lot of it's irrational, and I think that just because it's irrational or unfair or shameful doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it, because otherwise then you just feel also guilty as well as grieving in a way.
For me, I was just like, are you kidding? This has got to be an odds game at this point. Like, who's playing the giant joke on me when all of my friends had at least one of each? And here I am with 4. But my husband was incredible through that experience, because even though it was his first baby and I was definitely ruining it, I can't believe he even wanted to continue on with the pregnancy or the relationship. I was horrible. But he very much understood what that grief was and that, I needed to process it. And I will still have times. My boys are the most evolved humans, as many Gen Zs are. They're just an incredible generation. And they will read all the YA novels with me, and I sit there and watch This Is Us with Iggy, and we hold hands and we cry every week. And, all of those things. I'm still getting all those sort of feminine, in quotes, feminine moments. But, I can't make them read Little Women. They watched the movie.
Babe, I've got a daughter. I can't make her watch Little Women either. Don't idolise it. It's not like that.
I'm holding out for grandchildren at this point.
Yeah. Are you done?
Oh, fuck yes. Yes.
Really? I thought you'd go again.
No,
Did Hato want to?
No. I was much more pushing for Odie than he was. He feels like he genuinely loves the boys as much as he could ever love, a child that was biologically his own. And so he didn't feel the urge that I felt to give him a child. It's this bizarre idea that, I needed him to have a little bit of him, and I wanted us to have something that was us as well.
Yeah.
So no, he won't even get a dog at this point. He's like, we've got too much shit in our lives.
You're so fertile though. You better be careful.
Oh, it's not happening. It's definitely not happening.
You just have to walk past him or share a towel and you'll be knocked up again.
The thing is, I have this wonderful coach, this business coach, who made me do this 20-year life plan that I really resisted, even though I love planning things and I love spreadsheets. But it was basically the next 20 years and then all the children's names and all the years that they would be in at school and what travelling we might want to do and all of these ridiculously granular bits of information. And I realised when I did that Odie would be leaving home when I was 60 if he goes to uni at 18, which he probably won't. So I am definitely done because at some point, the idea that I've been raising children from 27 to 60 feels like too much.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah. At some point I need to have a life of my own.
You can find Justine's new book, Semi-Gloss, about her life, all aspects of it. It's such a great read. I thought I knew a lot of those stories, but I just loved it. I thought she's such a funny writer. I know Juz pretty well, but I learned a lot by reading her book. It's a really great read. You can find it at any good bookstore or follow the link in our show notes. If Justine's talk about her magazine days has had you craving more, we have a whole series that we've made for you. It's called Extraordinary Stories. It's a 5-episode podcast series about magazine queens. The first season is all about magazine queens. You can find it in our membership platform, M+. To learn more, head to mamamia.com.au/M+. That's MPLUS. The assistant producer of No Filter is Lucy Neville. The executive producer of No Filter is Elissa Ratliff. And I'm Mia Friedman. I'll see you soon.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.